Silence is never neutral. It is a signal of vibration, a language of its own, and yet most people treat it as nothing more than the absence of sound. They mistake quiet for peace, or worse, for indifference, failing to realize that silence carries with it weight, intention, and emotion. When a man goes silent, it is not an empty space. It is a statement, an unspoken truth that often reveals more about him than 1,000 words ever could. In relationships, in moments of tension or uncertainty, silence is rarely accidental. It is deliberate, even if the intention is not fully conscious. A man's silence can be confusing because it challenges our expectations. We are conditioned to equate communication with connection. We assume that if someone does not speak, they do not care, or that their feelings have disappeared. But silence is not a void, it is a mirror. It reflects his internal state, his fears, his uncertainties, his struggles. It can be a retreat, a moment of reflection, a shield against confrontation, or a test of your presence and patience. Understanding this is the first step in reclaiming your power when faced with silence. When he withdraws, it is often not about you. It is rarely a reflection of your worth or your desirability. It is a reflection of his inner landscape, of emotions he cannot articulate, of conflicts he cannot yet resolve. A man may go silent because he feels overwhelmed, because he is unsure of how to express himself, or because he is afraid of exposing vulnerability. Silence is often a protective mechanism, a way to guard his pride, his ego, or his heart. To misinterpret it as rejection is to misunderstand the language he is speaking. At the same time, silence is a statement of boundaries even when unintended. When he does not respond, it creates a space that asks something from you, consciously or unconsciously. It asks how you handle absence, how you manage uncertainty, and how you define your self-worth. It is a test of presence, of stability, of calm confidence. Those who react from neediness or fear inadvertently reinforce patterns of emotional instability, while those who respond with measured detachment communicate strength, patience, and emotional maturity. Silence magnifies the energy you bring to it because in its quiet, subtle ways, it is a stage for your character to shine. Silence also exposes patterns of control and influence. It can be a weapon, but it is also a signal. Some men retreat in silence because they feel powerless to resolve a situation or articulate their emotions. Some use it intentionally to create tension, to provoke a response, to observe how much attachment or need exists. But whether conscious or unconscious, silence always carries a message, and that message is amplified by the space around it. How you choose to respond, how you hold your composure, how you refuse to chase or explain unnecessarily speaks volumes. It is important to recognize that silence is rarely just emptiness. It is a pause full of meaning, full of possibility, full of information about what he values, what he fears, and how he navigates connection. In silence, his priorities are revealed. In silence, the strength of your own boundaries becomes visible. In silence, the truth of the relationship, or at least its current state, begins to surface. It is a moment to observe, to reflect, and to recalibrate your own energy without trying to fill the void with words that may be unnecessary or misaligned with the reality of his intentions. Understanding that silence is never neutral changes the way you perceive absence. It teaches you to listen without ears, to observe without intrusion, to feel without needing constant confirmation. It shifts the dynamic from reaction to awareness, from anxiety to measured attention. Silence becomes a tool, a teacher, a mirror, rather than a source of panic or insecurity. It forces you to confront the deeper dynamics of the relationship, to see what is real and what is imagined, to separate truth from fear, and to act with clarity rather than desperation. Even in silence, the energy between two people is alive. It moves, it shifts, it communicates. His absence of words can be loud, resonant, and revealing. It can uncover truths about his attachment style, his emotional intelligence, his readiness for commitment, or his fears of vulnerability. Observing this without judgment is critical. The quieter he becomes, the louder the underlying messages become if you are paying attention. Silence in its purest form is a test not only for him, but also for you. It shows what you tolerate, what you demand, what you respect, and what you allow to shape your emotional state. The most important thing to remember is that silence is never passive. It is never neutral. Every pause carries energy, intention, and consequence. Every gap in conversation, every retreat, every quiet moment is a choice, whether conscious or unconscious, and it interacts with the space around it. When he goes silent, It is not a sign that nothing is happening. It is a sign that everything is happening beneath the surface. And when you learn to interpret that, to hold your center, to respond with awareness rather than reaction, you step into a new kind of power, a power that is rooted not in control, but in presence, self-respect, and clarity, a power that understands that silence speaks louder than words, that the absence of sound does not equate to the absence of truth, and that in the stillness the real dynamics of attraction, intention, and emotion are laid bare for those willing to see them. When a man goes silent, it is easy to misinterpret his absence of words as a lack of interest, as if the pause itself signals that his feelings have vanished. But the truth is far subtler, far more complex. Silence does not automatically equal disinterest. More often, it is a reflection of emotional disconnection rather than a measure of care. Emotional disconnection is a temporary state, a space where he steps back from expressing himself, a zone where feelings are present but words and actions have not yet caught up. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it changes the way you respond, the way you observe, and the way you protect your own energy in the relationship. Emotional disconnection happens for many reasons, none of which necessarily implicate you personally. A man may retreat because he feels uncertain, overwhelmed, or unprepared to articulate his inner experience. He may be wrestling with fears, past traumas, or confusion about the intensity of his own emotions. This is a place where he is present internally but absent externally, where he experiences emotions deeply but lacks the capacity or the courage to communicate them effectively. Silence is his way of creating a buffer between what he feels and what he can express, a space where he can reconcile his internal landscape without external pressure. Many people confuse this with disinterest because society teaches us that connection must always be visible, immediate, and consistent. We are conditioned to expect continuous affirmation, constant updates, and verbal reassurance as evidence of care, but emotional reality is not always linear. A man can care deeply, feel strongly, and even be committed, and yet choose silence in certain moments because his emotions have not yet found a channel. This is not rejection. It is a signal that he is internally navigating something he cannot yet put into words. Silence as emotional disconnection is also a signal that he is processing himself. It is not an attack, and it is not a judgment on your value or presence. It is a reflection of his internal processing. He may be analyzing his feelings, trying to understand the depth of his connection, or weighing the vulnerability required to communicate honestly. During this pause, his silence may feel like distance, but it is actually a bridge being built internally, a preparation, not a departure. It is a space where he can confront fear, uncertainty, or conflict before sharing it externally. How you respond to this emotional disconnection is what determines the trajectory of connection. Reacting from fear, anxiety, or neediness amplifies tension and can push him further into silence. Pleading for explanation, trying to fill the gap with words, or projecting assumptions about disinterest triggers defensive mechanisms and reinforces disconnection. On the other hand, observing the silence with calm awareness, maintaining your self-respect, and holding your boundaries communicates a different kind of language, one that speaks of strength, stability, and emotional clarity. In the face of his silence, your energy becomes a mirror that shows him the effect of his emotional state without forcing an immediate response or compromising your own balance. Emotional disconnection is not permanent. It is fluid, shifting, and responsive to subtle cues of respect, patience, and presence. It can be healed by acknowledgement, by non-judgmental understanding, and by space that allows him to reconcile what he feels internally. It is important to differentiate between his inability to communicate and a lack of care. His silence may be prolonged, his words may be sparse, but the depth of feeling can remain intact beneath the surface. Recognizing this allows you to resist the temptation to overanalyze or assume the worst, and instead respond in a way that preserves your dignity and maintains the natural flow of emotional reconnection. Often, emotional disconnection manifests in ways that are subtle but telling. He may withdraw from texting or calling, speak less than usual, or create physical or emotional distance. These behaviors are not necessarily signs of disinterest. They are indicators that he is not fully aligned internally, that there is work being done behind the curtain of his silence. They invite observation rather than panic. They invite awareness rather than reaction. They teach you to trust energy and patterns over words alone, to discern presence and intention in subtler forms, and to hold yourself steady even when external confirmation is absent. Understanding that silence is emotional disconnection rather than disinterest also reframes your perspective on attachment and dependence. It allows you to see the difference between someone who is withdrawing to protect their emotions and someone who is withdrawing because their heart is elsewhere. Emotional disconnection is temporary and can coexist with deep care, while true disinterest is characterized by absence, avoidance, and lack of alignment. The key is your ability to observe without judgment, to maintain self-respect, and to engage with presence and patience rather than with need or anxiety. The more you internalize this truth, the less reactive and more empowered you become. Silence becomes a space for insight rather than fear, for awareness rather than desperation. It teaches you to separate reality from perception, to understand that emotional states are complex, layered, and sometimes invisible. In recognizing that his quiet moments reflect internal processing rather than lack of desire, you shift from reacting to observing, from chasing to understanding, from insecurity to grounded awareness. It allows you to maintain clarity, to protect your energy, and to hold space for the natural return of connection when he reconciles his internal state with the external reality of the relationship. Emotional disconnection is a temporary veil, not a permanent closure. It is a pause that carries meaning, a silence filled with signals, intentions, and hidden truths. It asks for patience, for discernment, and for the courage to remain whole and present without forcing answers, explanations, or affirmation. Recognizing the distinction between disconnection and disinterest allows you to navigate the quiet with confidence, to hold your boundaries, and to respect the invisible work happening behind the silence, to see it as a reflection of him rather than a reflection of your inadequacy, to respond with calm observation rather than fear-driven reaction, and to step into a form of power that understands the depth, complexity, and impermanence of internal emotional states. When he goes silent, it is rarely just about him. Often, it is a subtle, almost invisible test of your presence and your self-value. Silence functions as a mirror, reflecting not only his emotional state, but also how you show up, how you carry yourself, and how firmly you hold your sense of worth. In those quiet moments, when words are absent and actions are minimal, the real dynamics of attraction, respect, and connection come into sharp focus. The way you respond to his silence is far more revealing than anything he might say in conversation, because it exposes the strength of your emotional foundation, your self-respect, and the level of inner security you maintain regardless of external circumstances. Presence in this context is not just about being physically there. It is about the energy you carry, the calmness you project, and the stability you embody in the face of uncertainty. When a man withdraws, many women instinctively feel panic, anxiety, or the need to fill the void with explanations, calls, messages, or emotional displays. These reactions, though understandable, often signal a reliance on external validation rather than an internal grounding. True presence is maintained even when the other person is absent, even when the silence is prolonged. It is a silent confidence, a steady awareness that your worth does not fluctuate based on someone else's ability or willingness to communicate. Self-value is the cornerstone of this test. Silence becomes the measure of how much you respect yourself, your boundaries, and your time. It asks whether you will chase, beg, or explain unnecessarily, or whether you will remain grounded, knowing that your energy, attention, and love are precious. When a man withdraws, the temptation is to seek reassurance externally, to demand confirmation of interest, or to overcompensate for perceived gaps in connection. But these behaviors, no matter how subtle, reveal that your self-value is contingent upon his response. The moment you recognize that your value is independent of his silence, you stop playing his game unconsciously. You shift from reactive to intentional, from insecure to empowered, from emotionally dependent to self-respecting. Silence also reveals the depth of your patience and emotional intelligence. It tests whether you can remain poised and composed when there is no immediate feedback, no verbal affirmation, no constant reminder of care. A man's silence is not a void, it is an opportunity to observe, reflect, and assert boundaries. It measures your capacity to withstand discomfort without losing composure, to resist the urge to chase, and to understand that emotional connection does not always require immediate articulation. This is not about passivity, it is about strategic restraint. It is about recognizing that your response is a reflection of your inner alignment, not a reaction to external pressure. The way presence and self-value operate in moments of silence is subtle but powerful. Your energy becomes a language he cannot ignore, a form of communication beyond words. When you maintain calm grace and self-respect, you are conveying something far more potent than arguments or explanations could ever achieve. You are signaling that your life is full, your attention is discerning, and your worth is non-negotiable. This form of presence often creates a magnetic pull. It does not beg or demand, but it inspires curiosity, respect, and awareness in him. It demonstrates that while you care, you do not compromise your identity, and that your attention is given deliberately, not out of fear or neediness. Many people misunderstand this test and approach it with desperation, attempting to fill silence with action, explanation, or over-communication. These responses, though well-intentioned, often diminish attraction because they communicate scarcity and a lack of internal stability. Presence and self-value, by contrast, operate quietly, intentionally, and invisibly. They are visible not in what you say, but in what you refrain from saying, in the boundaries you uphold, in the emotional consistency you maintain, and in the dignity with which you navigate uncertainty. This is the unspoken power that silence tests, the power that is easily missed by those who confuse volume with value, urgency with importance, or activity with impact. Understanding that silence is a test allows you to approach it strategically. It reframes your perception of his withdrawal. It is no longer a personal slight or a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a mirror that reveals your strengths and weaknesses, your ability to remain grounded, and your capacity to honor your own energy without compromise. When you respond with intentional presence, you create an unshakable foundation that communicates to him that you are whole, that you are self-respecting, and that your attention is not easily earned or lost. This does not mean you are cold or detached. It means you are clear, centered, and aligned with your own value, which is far more compelling than any reactive pursuit could ever be. Presence and self-value are intertwined. One cannot truly exist without the other. Maintaining presence in silence demonstrates that your self-worth is stable. Upholding self-value in silence demonstrates that your presence is intentional. Together, they communicate a quiet power, a stability that is magnetic and undeniable. This test is not about manipulation or control. It is about clarity, observation, and alignment. It measures not his feelings alone, but your ability to hold yourself with dignity, to honor your boundaries, and to navigate the invisible currents of connection without losing yourself. Through this lens, silence is transformed from a source of anxiety into a proving ground for your emotional intelligence. It challenges you to observe without reaction, to wait without fear, and to assert your presence without words. It teaches you that true power in relationships comes not from chasing or pleading, but from embodying a sense of self-worth that is independent of external validation. Every pause, every gap, every quiet moment becomes an opportunity to demonstrate your composure, your discernment, and your unwavering understanding of your own value. When a man goes silent, it is rarely simple. Behind the quiet often lies an internal struggle that is invisible, complex, and layered. What appears as absence or distance is actually a battle within himself, a negotiation between fear, pride, desire, and uncertainty. This internal struggle is rarely about you. It is about him, about the unspoken conflicts, insecurities, and emotions that he has not yet learned to articulate. Recognizing this is crucial because it allows you to see beyond the surface, beyond the silence, beyond the temptation to interpret absence as rejection, and instead observe a process that is deeply human, deeply vulnerable, and deeply revealing of who he is in that moment. Men, like women, experience emotional turbulence. They feel tension between the desire to express their feelings and the fear of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected. Silence becomes a natural refuge, a space where they can avoid confrontation while attempting to reconcile conflicting impulses. This is the paradox of emotional expression. The very depth of feeling that could connect them to you is often what drives them into quiet. He may want to speak, to clarify, to reassure, but the weight of his own thoughts and insecurities prevents him from doing so. His silence is not a withdrawal from you personally. It is a reflection of the intensity of his internal conflict, a signal that he is processing something he cannot yet fully articulate. Internal struggle often manifests as inconsistency. One moment he may reach out with warmth and engagement, and the next he retreats into silence. This back and forth is confusing, but it is not random. It reflects his oscillation between emotional courage and emotional hesitation. In his silence, he is negotiating with himself. How much vulnerability can I show? How much honesty can I risk? How do I reconcile what I feel with what I fear? These questions are not always conscious, but they shape behavior in profound ways. They explain why a man who seems committed and caring can suddenly become distant, why words fail him when they are most needed, and why actions sometimes contradict intention. Understanding that his silence is rooted in internal struggle shifts your perspective. It moves you from self-blame to awareness. It teaches you that the gaps in communication are not a reflection of your value, but of his process. It allows you to observe with clarity rather than panic, to maintain your composure rather than chase, to recognize that the tension you feel externally is often a mirror of his inner battle. When you see silence this way, you stop interpreting it as disinterest or rejection and start recognizing it as a sign of complexity, depth, and humanity. This internal struggle is often tied to identity, pride, and past experiences. Men who have been hurt, rejected, or shamed in previous relationships carry invisible scars that influence how they navigate connection. Silence becomes a defense mechanism, a way to avoid reliving old pain or to protect themselves from new vulnerability. It is not necessarily intentional manipulation. It is often instinctive, a pattern developed over years of emotional conditioning. When he goes quiet, he may be wrestling with fear of inadequacy, fear of loss, fear of exposing parts of himself that he believes are unacceptable or unworthy. These fears create a tension that is both invisible and palpable, and his silence is the surface expression of that tension. In observing his silence, you also gain insight into his priorities and his capacity for emotional processing. The way he handles internal struggle, even in quiet, reveals much about his character. Does he retreat into introspection to grow and process? Or does he avoid confrontation and responsibility? Does he carry awareness of his emotions and work to reconcile them? Or does he suppress them until they become pressure points that affect the relationship indirectly? Your ability to discern these patterns is enhanced when you recognize silence not as absence, but as an active struggle occurring beneath the surface. Your response to this internal struggle matters profoundly. Reacting with frustration, panic, or desperate attempts to extract communication can amplify his tension. Trying to force clarity or affirmation interrupts the natural process he is undergoing internally and risks entangling you in the turbulence of his emotions. On the other hand, holding your ground with calm awareness, maintaining your boundaries, and observing without judgment creates a space where his internal struggle can unfold safely, where he can reconcile his emotions without external pressure, and where he may eventually re-emerge with clarity and alignment. Internal struggle is rarely quick or linear. It is a process, a journey, a confrontation with self that requires patience and reflection. It is the tension between what he desires and what he fears, between connection and vulnerability, between instinct and reason. Your understanding of this allows you to maintain clarity and confidence in the face of silence, to honor your own needs without diminishing the humanity of his process, and to observe the situation with emotional intelligence rather than reactive desperation. Silence becomes a lens through which you can see both him and the relational dynamics unfolding more clearly, a lens that separates fear from reality, projection from intention, and emotion from action. Recognizing that silence exposes his internal struggle also deepens your understanding of human behavior. It teaches that emotional expression is not always immediate, that love and care do not always require constant articulation, and that absence of words can be a reflection of complexity rather than absence of feeling. It allows you to cultivate discernment, to recognize patterns of avoidance versus genuine processing, and to maintain presence and self-value even when communication is imperfect. You begin to see that silence is not emptiness, it is a form of internal negotiation, a testing ground for emotional resilience, and a mirror reflecting both his insecurities and his potential for growth. This perspective transforms how you navigate moments of quiet in a relationship. Instead of panic, there is observation. Instead of chasing, there is awareness. Instead of fear, there is clarity. You learn to honor both his struggle and your own boundaries, to witness the invisible currents of thought and emotion without compromising your energy, to hold space for reflection without seeking to control the outcome, and to recognize that what appears as withdrawal may in fact be the manifestation of an active, intense, and sometimes painful inner dialogue that shapes how he approaches connection, intimacy, and vulnerability. When a man goes silent, it is tempting to focus solely on what is not being said. We measure connection by the frequency of messages, the clarity of explanations, and the presence of verbal affirmation, but this perspective misses a profound truth: your energy communicates far more than words ever could. Words are temporary, fleeting, and often reactive, but the energy you carry is constant, invisible, and deeply influential. Every thought, every feeling, every boundary you uphold sends a signal that resonates beyond the need for explicit articulation. In moments of silence, when the external world offers little to hold on to, your energy becomes the language that shapes perception, influence, and emotional alignment. Energy is subtle but undeniable. It is expressed in your presence, your calm, your confidence, and your composure. It is conveyed through the way you hold yourself, the consistency of your boundaries, the steadiness of your emotional response, and the unspoken assurance that your self-worth does not depend on his immediate reactions. When words are absent, energy becomes the conduit through which connection is maintained or lost. A man may withdraw from conversation, but he cannot avoid the resonance of your presence, the silent declaration of your values, your emotional independence, and your personal alignment. Your energy speaks in ways that words never could, creating signals that are unmistakable to those who are sensitive enough to perceive them. Many people underestimate the power of energy because it is intangible. They believe that explanation, pleading, or constant reassurance will bridge the gap created by silence, but this often backfires. Words alone can be interpreted, doubted, or ignored, especially when they emerge from a place of need or insecurity. Energy, by contrast, cannot be dismissed. It operates on a deeper level, shaping the emotional landscape without force, guiding perception without demand, and communicating strength without overt assertion. When you maintain your energy with awareness and intentionality, it becomes a quiet but compelling force, influencing not only his perception of you, but also the way he navigates his own internal struggles. Silence amplifies the role of energy because absence magnifies what is present. When he stops speaking, when messages go unanswered, when conversations pause, your energy becomes the dominant signal in the space. A calm, confident, self-respecting energy communicates that you are whole, that you are intentional, and that your attention is given with discernment. Conversely, frantic, anxious, or desperate energy communicates scarcity, need, and a lack of internal grounding. The same words can carry entirely different meanings depending on the energy behind them. Energy shapes perception. It defines attraction. It creates resonance far more effectively than argument, explanation, or persuasion ever could. Your energy also influences how he experiences his own silence. A man who withdraws is often processing emotions, fears, or conflicts internally. He is navigating a private world of thoughts and insecurities, and the energy you bring can either ease or exacerbate that process. Calm, grounded energy creates space for reflection, for clarity, and for eventual reconnection. Reactive, anxious, or pleading energy adds pressure, amplifies fear, and can push him further into withdrawal. Your energy sets the tone for the dynamic even when no words are exchanged. It is a language that communicates stability, self-worth, and alignment, and it is far more persuasive than words because it is felt rather than heard. Energy is also a reflection of self-respect. When you maintain your composure in silence, you signal that your worth is inherent and independent of external validation. You communicate that you are capable of holding space for both yourself and him without needing constant reassurance. This creates a magnetic effect because it distinguishes you from those who operate from neediness or insecurity. It communicates that your attention is valuable, that your love is measured, and that your presence is intentional. Energy rooted in self-respect cannot be ignored. It commands recognition without demand, attention without pleading, and respect without assertion. Understanding the power of energy requires awareness of your own internal state. It asks that you cultivate emotional independence, self-confidence, and intentional presence. Your energy is not just a reflection of external circumstances. It is an emanation of your inner alignment. If you are anxious, fearful, or reactive, it will be perceived regardless of the words you choose. If you are calm, grounded, and self-assured, it will resonate even in the absence of speech. This is why the same silence from him can elicit entirely different responses depending on the energy you bring. One woman may feel panic, frustration, or doubt, while another feels composed, observant, and powerful. The difference is energy. Energy also communicates boundaries. In moments of silence, it demonstrates what you will tolerate, what you will not, and the level of attention and respect you demand without needing to articulate it verbally. It is an invisible assertion of personal authority, a quiet calibration of influence that signals that while connection is welcomed, it will not come at the expense of your dignity or self-respect. When maintained consistently, this energy establishes a framework for how he perceives, approaches, and values the relationship. It communicates that your presence is earned through respect and alignment, not simply through availability or proximity. Finally, your energy affects the rhythm of the relationship itself. It shapes the flow of engagement, the timing of reconnection, and the quality of interaction when words resume. Silence can be a test, a pause, a vacuum, but it is also a canvas, and the energy you bring colors that canvas in ways that are impossible to ignore. Calm, confident, self-respecting energy creates attraction, fosters patience, and reinforces your own alignment, while reactive, anxious, or needy energy erodes influence, diminishes attraction, and amplifies tension. In the dance of connection, energy is the music that guides movement, far more powerful than the words exchanged on any given day. Patience and detachment are often misunderstood. Many interpret them as passivity, as resignation, or as weakness, especially in the context of relationships. When a man goes silent, people instinctively feel the need to act, to chase, to explain, to fill the void with words, actions, or pleas. But patience and detachment are not about doing nothing. They are not about surrendering or ignoring reality. They are strategic, deliberate, and profoundly powerful tools that create space, clarity, and influence. They allow you to navigate silence without losing yourself, without compromising your self-respect, and without reacting from scarcity or fear. Patience is the ability to endure uncertainty without panic, to observe without immediate judgment, and to wait without desperation. It is an active practice of self-control, emotional awareness, and grounded presence. When a man withdraws or goes quiet, your patience is tested because instinctively, human nature wants resolution, closure, or reassurance. Yet patience teaches that not all answers come immediately, that not all emotional processes can be rushed, and that timing is often as important as intention. Patience allows you to see his silence not as rejection, but as a reflection of internal processing, fear, or hesitation. It gives him the necessary space to confront his emotions without interference, and it protects you from overextending yourself in ways that diminish your energy or compromise your boundaries. Detachment, on the other hand, is the conscious separation of your emotional state from his actions. It is not indifference, it is clarity. It is the recognition that his silence is about him, not about your value. Detachment allows you to remain centered, self-respecting, and emotionally independent even when the external environment is uncertain. It teaches you that your worth, your confidence, and your peace are not contingent upon someone else's ability or willingness to communicate. In detachment, you reclaim power because you no longer allow the ebb and flow of another person's attention or engagement to dictate your mood, decisions, or self-perception. Together, patience and detachment form a strategic alliance. Patience slows your response to the instinctive impulses that arise from fear or insecurity, and detachment anchors you in self-value, preventing emotional overinvestment. They transform moments of silence from periods of anxiety into opportunities for insight, reflection, and subtle influence. They allow you to observe his behavior without distortion, to maintain your own emotional clarity, and to navigate the dynamics of connection without compromise. In practice, they teach you that influence is often achieved not through words or persuasion, but through presence, alignment, and energy. When applied strategically, patience and detachment create a unique form of power. They show him that while you care, you are not dependent on constant validation, immediate responses, or verbal affirmation. This power is magnetic because it communicates self-respect, emotional intelligence, and inner stability, qualities that cannot be fabricated or faked. In his silence, he observes not emptiness but composure. He perceives not neediness but alignment. He experiences not desperation but quiet strength. These qualities are not achieved through chasing, pleading, or explanations. They are cultivated through the consistent practice of patience and detachment. It is important to note that strategic patience is not passive waiting. It is an active, conscious decision to maintain boundaries, to hold your emotional center, and to resist reacting impulsively. It involves observing patterns, discerning intentions, and choosing responses that honor both yourself and the relationship dynamics. It is about holding space for both him and yourself without forcing outcomes, without compromising your dignity, and without losing clarity about your own priorities. Every pause, every silent moment becomes an opportunity to demonstrate strength through restraint, wisdom through observation, and alignment through composure. Detachment amplifies the effects of patience because it removes the emotional dependency that often clouds judgment. It allows you to view silence objectively, to recognize patterns without distortion, and to resist projecting insecurity onto his behavior. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It teaches that your life, your energy, and your attention are yours to steward. It reinforces the understanding that a relationship is healthiest when both individuals are fully present and fully grounded, rather than entangled in reactive behaviors, fear, or unbalanced need. By practicing detachment, you communicate boundaries silently yet powerfully, showing that your participation in the connection is intentional, not coerced, and that your respect for yourself is non-negotiable. Patience and detachment also foster emotional resilience. They teach you to withstand ambiguity without losing composure, to tolerate temporary distance without doubting your value, and to trust that connection flows most naturally when force is removed. In contrast, impulsive chasing, reactive questioning, or emotional overexposure often intensifies tension, amplifies miscommunication, and diminishes attraction. Strategic silence, grounded in patience and detachment, shifts the balance of influence subtly and effectively because it demonstrates strength without aggression, self-worth without defensiveness, and presence without dependence. Ultimately, the combination of patience and detachment reframes silence from a challenge to an opportunity. It allows you to observe without reacting, to maintain energy without compromise, and to demonstrate value without words. It transforms the space between you into a testing ground for emotional intelligence, alignment, and self-respect. It teaches that influence is not achieved through volume, explanation, or pursuit, but through composure, consistency, and quiet authority. In applying patience and detachment strategically, you communicate far more than words could convey that you are whole, self-respecting, grounded, and emotionally intelligent, and that your attention and energy are neither disposable nor reactive,